Sarah Blake walked along the quiet forest trail just outside Maple Ridge, Colorado, trying to clear her thoughts as the cool afternoon wind brushed against her face. She had spent the whole week battling exhaustion, loneliness, and a nagging feeling that something in her life had gone out of place. Her job at the local insurance office felt draining, her small apartment felt too silent, and conversations with coworkers never went beyond surface-level smiles. She kept walking because the movement made her feel less stuck, even if only for a little while. The forest was the one place where she could breathe without feeling watched or judged. As she walked deeper into the trees, she pulled her jacket tighter around her. The branches above swayed, scattering golden leaves around her like falling pieces of sunlight. For a moment, she allowed herself to enjoy the peaceful scene. She hadn't felt peaceful in a long time. Her days were predictable, lonely, almost mechanical. She woke up, went to work, came home, ate dinner alone, and then scrolled on her phone until sleep pulled her in. It was a routine she didn't hate, but she didn't love it either. It felt like she had drifted into a life she didn't choose but also didn't know how to change. Just as she was beginning to relax, she heard a heavy rustling behind her, sharp, fast, and too intentional to be the wind. She turned around slowly, thinking maybe it was another hiker, a deer or a stray animal, but the moment her eyes focused, her breath caught in her throat. A huge Doberman was sprinting toward her, its dark coat shining under the weak autumn sun. Its eyes fixed on her with startling intensity. Sarah froze, every hint of calm vanished, her heartbeat raced so fast she thought she would collapse. She knew nothing about dogs, especially not giant ones that ran full speed toward strangers. The Doberman's muscles moved with powerful precision, its nails scraping against the dirt, its chest rising and falling quickly like it had been running for a long time. She wanted to scream but her voice got stuck. She wanted to run but her legs locked. She could only stand there, hands shaking, breath shallow, hoping she wasn't about to become the headline of a small-town news story. But when the Doberman reached her, it didn't attack. Instead, it skidded to a stop right in front of her and let out a high, desperate whine. It circled her, nudging her leg and arm, its movements fast, urgent, almost frantic. Sarah blinked in confusion. The dog wasn't aggressive, it wasn't growling or baring its teeth, it looked terrified, not terrifying. Sarah lifted her hands slowly, palms open. "Hey, what is it?" she whispered, though her voice trembled like she was still trying to convince herself she wasn't in danger. The dog let out another sharp cry, grabbing her sleeve gently between its teeth and tugging her toward the trees. It wasn't attacking. It was pleading, trying to pull her somewhere. At first, Sarah fought the instinct to follow. Every rational voice in her head shouted that this was a terrible idea, that she should turn around, that she should go home, that she shouldn't trust a dog she had never seen before. But something in the way the Doberman looked at her, something raw, emotional, almost human, pushed through her fear. The dog stepped a few paces away, then turned back, eyes locked on her as if saying please. Its chest rose and fell quickly, showing how long it had been running, how desperate it truly was. With her heart pounding against her ribs, Sarah finally took a step forward. The dog responded immediately, racing ahead but stopping every few seconds to make sure she was following. It was like being pulled into a story she didn't understand, like fate had decided to twist her quiet day into something entirely new. The deeper they moved into the woods, the colder the air grew. Sarah's steps quickened as she tried to keep up with the Doberman. Leaves crunched loudly beneath her boots. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretched longer, and the world felt suddenly different. Not just quieter but heavier, charged with some unseen tension. After a few minutes, the Doberman slowed, its ears twitching, its tail stiff with worry. Sarah followed its gaze until she saw something that made her stomach drop. A man was lying on the ground beneath a fallen tree branch, his body twisted awkwardly, his clothes dusty, his face pale. The moment she realized he wasn't moving much, she felt her chest tighten. The Doberman rushed to him, nudging his shoulder, whining loudly, licking the side of his face as if trying to wake him. Sarah hurried forward, her breath sharp, her fear shifting from the dog to the man on the ground. He looked to be in his early 30s, maybe the same age as her. His hair was dark brown, slightly messy, his jaw lightly stubbled, his hands were scraped, and his breathing was shallow but present. The fallen branch wasn't huge, but it had clearly knocked him down and pinned part of his leg. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands shaking again, but this time with fear for him, not for herself. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, leaning closer. The man's eyelids twitched, then slowly opened. His gaze was unfocused at first, wandering around before landing on her face. His eyes were warm hazel, soft even through the pain, and for a brief heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. There was something in the way he looked at her, something gentle, grateful, almost relieved. Even though they were strangers, even though he could barely speak, there was a connection, a spark of recognizing a kind soul when the world is at its harshest. The Doberman let out a low, trembling sound beside them. The man slowly lifted his hand, touching the dog's head with weak affection. "Good boy," he whispered. Though the word came out thin and strained, Sarah swallowed hard, trying to focus. "I'm going to call for help," she said. Her voice still soft but more determined. She pulled out her phone. Relief flooding her when she saw there was still signal. As she spoke quickly to the emergency dispatcher, she kept glancing at the injured man, afraid he might slip away if she looked for too long at anything else. The dispatcher instructed her to stay with him until help arrived. She hung up and moved closer, gently brushing some leaves away from his forehead. "Help is coming," she assured him. Her hands were cold, but her voice carried warmth. The man nodded faintly, his expression easing a little, like her presence alone was comforting. Minutes felt like hours as they waited. The Doberman stayed pressed against the man's side, his eyes moving between Sarah and his owner with a worried intensity. Sarah kept talking softly, trying to keep the man awake. She asked for his name and he whispered Ethan. Before closing his eyes briefly from the strain, she felt something twist inside her when he spoke his name, like it was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. She didn't know him, but in that moment she felt responsible for him, connected to him in a way that caught her completely off guard. When the paramedics finally arrived, they moved quickly, lifting the branch and checking Ethan's injuries. They thanked Sarah for staying, telling her she likely saved his life by finding him so fast. She smiled, but her heart was still racing. She watched as they loaded him onto the stretcher, her eyes following him like she didn't want to lose sight of him. As they began to wheel him away, Ethan opened his eyes again, just barely. His gaze found hers, weak but warm, and even though he could barely form words, his expression said everything. Gratitude, softness, a strange recognition. Sarah stood there, unable to move, the forest silent around her, the Doberman sitting at her feet as if he trusted her more than anyone else. And as the ambulance door closed, she felt something shift inside her. Something she wasn't ready to name, something that told her this moment was not an ending, it was the beginning. Beginning she never expected, a beginning she wouldn't forget. Ethan Hale woke up in a blur of hospital lights, soft beeping sounds, and a dull throbbing in his leg. He blinked a few times, trying to remember what had happened in the woods, but all he could picture was Duke's panicked bark and the faint shape of a woman leaning over him. Her voice had been calm, warm, steady, like a gentle hand pulling him back toward consciousness. Even now, that memory clung to him like a warm thread, holding him together. A nurse stepped into the room, checking the machines and smiling when she noticed he had woken. She asked him a few questions, told him he was lucky, explained the injury wasn't as serious as it looked, and said someone had stayed close until the ambulance arrived. Ethan already knew who she meant. He didn't know her name then, but he knew the feeling she left behind. Safety, comfort, something achingly kind. When the nurse stepped out, Duke pushed his way into the room, ignoring every rule meant to keep animals out. His nails clicked on the floor as he rushed to Ethan's bedside, whining loudly, tail trembling with relief. Ethan reached down with a shaky hand, trying not to laugh from the pain. "You saved me, buddy," he whispered, and Duke pressed his head into Ethan's palm, like he was just grateful Ethan was awake. Moments later, the door opened again and Sarah stepped in. Her steps were quiet, her shoulders slightly tense, as if she wasn't sure she should be there. Ethan looked up and for a moment neither of them spoke. They just held each other's gaze, both surprised at how familiar the other already felt. "You're awake," Sarah said softly, and although the words were simple, Ethan felt something warm spread through him. She looked tired, like she had been worrying for hours, but her eyes held a softness that made him feel oddly calm. Sarah explained everything. How Duke had found her, how she followed him, how she stayed with him until help arrived. Ethan listened carefully, watching the way she spoke with gentle honesty, watching how Duke stayed close to her like he trusted her as much as he trusted him. That detail struck Ethan more deeply than he expected. Duke rarely bonded with strangers, yet he had chosen her, and that alone made Ethan pay attention. Over the next few days, Sarah kept visiting. At first, she told herself it was only because Duke kept showing up at her cabin door, impatient until she followed him back to the hospital. But she knew that wasn't the full truth. Something about Ethan pulled her toward him, not in a dramatic love-at-first-sight way, but in a quieter, deeper way, like talking to him eased a loneliness she hadn't realized had grown so heavy. Their conversation started small, She told him about her job, her decision to move to Maple Ridge for a quieter life, her love for nature even though she rarely explored it. He told her about his work as a freelance photographer, how he had been hiking to capture some fall shots when the branch fell. They talked about little things, movies, music, embarrassing stories, and those little things formed something bigger between them, something soft and unspoken. Ethan often found himself waiting for the sound of footsteps outside his room, hoping it was her. When she entered, the air in the room shifted, like someone opened a window and let sunlight in. Sarah didn't realize how much he noticed about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way her voice softened when she talked to Duke, the way she looked away when compliments made her shy. But Ethan noticed everything, and each detail pulled him closer. Sarah also felt something changing inside her. Ethan had a gentle humor that made even painful moments easier. He had a warm way of looking at her that made her feel seen, not judged or overlooked like she often felt at work. She wasn't used to someone paying attention to her thoughts, her emotions, her words. Yet Ethan listened like her voice mattered. Like she mattered, and that sensation alone stirred something tender in her heart. On the fourth day, they had their longest conversation yet. It happened in the late afternoon, when the hospital hallway was quiet and sunlight poured through the blinds. Sarah sat beside him while Ethan talked about his past. A breakup that left him feeling like he wasn't enough, a series of personal losses that made him doubt his own worth. He didn't cry, but his voice carried a heaviness that made Sarah's chest ache. She didn't know why he trusted her enough to open up like that, but he did, and she didn't interrupt or judge him. She just listened gently, offering comfort with small nods and soft responses. He wasn't dramatic or bitter, just honest, painfully honest in a way that touched her heart. When he finished, Ethan let out a shaky breath and glanced at her. "I don't usually talk about things like that," he admitted, "but with you it feels easy." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm glad you did," she said quietly. "You shouldn't carry everything alone." There was a moment, a still, delicate moment, when they simply looked at each other and something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something warm and promising, something that felt like the beginning of trust. But everything shifted the very next morning. Sarah walked into the room holding a coffee for Ethan, smiling softly as she pushed open the door. But she froze when she saw another woman standing beside his bed, tall, confident, beautiful, wearing expensive clothes and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan looked surprised, uncomfortable even, but Sarah didn't know how to read the expression. The woman glanced at Sarah, assessing her with a sharp, dismissive look. Then she turned back to Ethan, talking in a soft but cold voice. Something about her tone made Sarah's stomach twist. She realized quickly who the woman was. Someone from Ethan's past, someone important enough to walk straight into his life without knocking. Sarah's breath grew shallow. She set the coffee on the counter without a word and stepped back. The room suddenly felt smaller, and the warmth she had grown used to shattered like thin glass. "Sarah?" Ethan called her name, but his voice sounded caught between two worlds. She didn't know where she fit or whether she fit at all. She didn't want to stand there awkwardly while this woman claimed space she clearly used to own. She forced a polite smile, whispered, "I'll let you talk," and stepped out. Duke followed her, pressing his side against her leg as if knowing she was hurting. Sarah didn't cry. She wasn't the type to break that easily. But something inside her felt bruised, like she had stepped too close to a fire she wasn't meant to touch. As she walked down the hallway, her steps quick and uneven, Duke kept looking back toward Ethan's room, torn between loyalty to his owner and concern for Sarah. She scratched behind his ear, whispering, "It's okay." Even though it wasn't, not really. Sarah didn't know what Ethan was explaining to the woman, didn't know how much of their past was still alive, didn't know if she had misread everything between them. All she knew was that she had suddenly stepped into a story that already had scars, history, and unresolved pieces, and she was terrified she was only a temporary chapter. Sarah tried to convince herself that walking away from Ethan was the right thing to do. She had stepped into his life by accident, saved him by luck, and stayed because something about him felt warm in a way she had forgotten people could be. But seeing his ex-fiancée standing beside his hospital bed, confident, beautiful, part of a world that looked more polished than her own, made Sarah feel like she had wandered into a story she had no place in. She didn't cry, but a quiet hurt settled in her chest as she walked home, like cold wind slipping under her clothes. For the next 2 days, she avoided the hospital completely. She kept expecting her routine to feel normal again, but everything felt different. Her small cabin felt too quiet, her mind too loud, and even the forest outside didn't calm her the way it usually did. She tried reading, cooking, cleaning, anything to stop thinking. But her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan. She remembered his gentle smile, the way his voice softened when he talked to her, the gratitude in his eyes when he woke up and found her sitting beside him. Those memories felt warm, but thinking about his ex made everything cold again. Then on the evening of the second day, Sarah heard scratching at her door, soft but persistent. She froze, her heart thumping because she knew exactly who made that sound. When she opened the door, Duke stood there, tail slowly tapping, eyes full of quiet urgency. It felt almost unreal to see the giant Doberman standing on her porch like he belonged there, as if he refused to let her disappear from Ethan's life without a fight. Sarah crouched and placed her hand on his head. "You're not supposed to be wandering alone," she whispered. But Duke nudged her wrist and then turned as if telling her to follow. She shook her head at first, whispering that she shouldn't get involved again, but Duke let out a soft, almost sad sound, and that sound pulled at her heart until she finally sighed and grabbed her jacket. Duke led her through the woods and out toward a familiar lookout point, a tall cliff that overlooked the town of Maple Ridge. The sun was sinking behind the mountains, painting the sky with soft gold and pink, and standing near the edge, leaning on a walking stick, was Ethan. He turned when he heard her steps, and the look on his face made her stop breathing for a moment. He looked relieved, hopeful, and nervous all at once, like he had been waiting for her without knowing if she'd ever show up. Sarah stood still, unsure of what to say, unsure if she should even be there. But Ethan took a small step toward her, his movement slow because of his leg, and spoke gently. "I didn't ask her to come," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "My ex showed up because she heard what happened, but she and I were done. We've been done for a long time." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I told her that, and I meant it." Sarah looked away at the horizon, her heart still tangled in doubt. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, not angry, just hurt and confused. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Because I didn't think she'd walk into my hospital room like that. I didn't expect her at all, and I was trying to figure out how to explain without making you think I still cared about her." He shook his head softly. "I don't, Sarah, I promise you that." Sarah's voice lowered barely above a whisper. "But she's part of your past." Ethan nodded gently. "She is, but not my future." His eyes didn't leave hers, and she felt the sincerity in his voice, strong and steady like a hammer striking truth. He took another step toward her and stopped just close enough that she could feel his warmth even with the cool wind blowing between them. "The reason I came here today," he continued, "is because this is where I go when I need to think clearly." He pointed to the view, the glowing sky, the quiet town, the calm river running through the valley. "I didn't come to think about her," he added softly. "I came to think about you." Sarah's breath caught again, not from pain this time, but from the sudden warmth rushing into her chest. "Me?" she repeated, not trusting her own voice. Ethan nodded, his eyes steady. "You?" He told her how Duke kept pacing and whining whenever she didn't visit, how the dog ran to the door anytime he thought he heard her outside the hospital, how Ethan started to realize that the connection between them wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper, something rare, something that made him feel alive again after months of emotional numbness. Sarah listened in silence, and every word felt like it melted another layer of the fear she'd been carrying. She had spent so long convincing herself she didn't deserve something meaningful, something kind, something warm, but standing there, listening to Ethan talk about her with such softness, she felt a fragile hope rise inside her. Duke walked between them and nudged Sarah's hand toward Ethan, almost like he was trying to complete a puzzle the two humans were too hesitant to finish. Sarah let out a shaky breath, the sound almost a laugh. "Your dog is very persuasive," she said quietly. Ethan smiled, a real, honest smile that reached his eyes. "He always knows what I need better than I do." For a moment, everything went quiet except for the wind brushing through the trees. The last light of sunset touched the edges of their faces, creating a gentle glow around them. Ethan's voice softened. "Sarah, I don't want to lose touch with you." His tone was simple, but the emotion behind it was clear. "I want to get to know you more. I want to see where this goes. I want to take things slow, steady, real." Sarah swallowed hard, her heart fluttering with nerves and longing. "Ethan, this feels fast," she admitted. "Everything that happened, everything we went through, it's a lot." He nodded, respecting her honesty. "It is a lot," he agreed. "But the connection we have, that's real, and I don't want fear to take that away from us." He glanced at the ground for a moment before looking up again. "Do you?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She stared at the fading sky and then at Ethan, at the way he looked at her, not with expectancy, but with hope and patience, like he would give her all the time she needed, like her feelings mattered to him more than anything. Something inside her shifted, the loneliness she had carried for so long loosening its hold little by little. Finally, she whispered, "I don't want to lose it either." Ethan's shoulders eased as if he had been holding his breath. A soft smile appeared on his face, gentle and full of relief. He extended his hand toward her, not grabbing or pulling, just offering. Sarah hesitated only for a second before placing her hand in his. The moment their hands touched, something settled in her heart, something calm and warm and steady. They stood there together, holding hands as the last streaks of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Duke sat beside them, tail finally relaxed, as if his mission was complete. Ethan spoke again, his voice almost a whisper. "The day you found me, you changed everything. I thought I was alone in that forest, and somehow you showed up exactly when I needed someone the most." Sarah felt her eyes sting, but the emotion wasn't painful, it was healing. "I think Duke led me there for a reason," she said, smiling down at the dog. Ethan nodded. "I think he led you to me," he said softly, then added in a quieter, more emotional voice. "But I also think he led me to you." The wind cooled around them, but for the first time in a long time Sarah didn't feel cold at all. She felt something warm spreading through her chest, hope, possibility, the beginning of something real. As they walked back toward town together, Duke trotting happily ahead, Sarah realized she wasn't stepping into someone else's story. She was stepping into her own. One she didn't expect, but one she was finally ready to follow, a second chance at life, at love, and at something gentle and true. And this time she wasn't going to let fear push her away. Not when she had finally found something worth holding on to.